The first thing I noticed was her face. Not in person, not through a call, but in a grainy, low-light picture that hit my phone at exactly 10:43 p.m. on a Tuesday night. My phone vibrated twice, lighting up the dark corner of my living room where I had been half asleep after a 14-hour shift on base. There were no words attached to the message, just the image. Grandma, sitting alone on a cold wooden bench at the town's bus station, her small frame curled inward beneath a worn, thinning coat, hands wrapped tightly around her purse like it was the last thing grounding her. A paper coffee cup rested empty near her feet, probably something she had bought hours earlier just to stay warm. Behind her, the station looked abandoned. No movement, no people, just silence. The clock on the wall sat frozen at 9:17 p.m. It was deep winter, the kind where the air cuts through you before you even see your breath. I could almost feel that cold pressing through her coat, seeping into her bones. And then I saw it, her expression. It wasn't sadness, it wasn't confusion, it was something heavier, resignation, like she had already accepted that no one was coming, like she had made peace with sitting there until she simply couldn't anymore. A second message came moments later. The number was one I knew immediately, my cousin Mia. "I thought you should know. Your parents dropped her here, said they can't take care of her anymore." I read it once, then again, then a third time before it actually registered. My parents had taken my grandmother, the woman who raised me, and left her at a bus station like she was something disposable. My heart slammed against my chest. Heat burned behind my eyes, but it wasn't grief. It was anger, sharp, controlled, rising fast. I typed back instantly, "Where are they now?" Mia replied, "Home. They said Grandma stays there until she figures something out. They don't want her back." I exhaled slowly, steadying myself the way training had drilled into me before every mission. Except this wasn't training. This wasn't theoretical. This was real. My parents had always been difficult, detached, never nurturing, not to me, not to my siblings, and certainly not to her. But this wasn't just indifference. This was cruelty disguised as practicality. I checked the time, 10:47 p.m. I could have handled it quietly, driven the 40 miles, picked her up, brought her home, and let the night disappear without a trace. That's what most people would have done, but I wasn't most people. I was calm, focused, precise, because I'm not just a granddaughter, I'm a Navy SEAL, and when we move, we don't just act, we send a message. I opened my contacts and pulled up a group chat labeled Echo Squad. The people in that chat weren't just teammates, they were family forged under pressure, the kind of people who had dragged me out of danger and trusted me to do the same for them. Need support, civilian retrieval, no threat, high impact. The reply came in seconds. Where and when? I sent the photo, then the location. By 10:52 p.m., the plan was locked. 5 Humvees, 50 SEALs, fully equipped, rolling out in 20. I changed into my dress blues, not combat gear, not camo, the formal uniform, the one reserved for moments that matter, moments that demand attention. The medals across my chest weren't decoration, they were proof of everything I had endured and survived. Tonight wasn't just about bringing her home, it was about making sure everyone understood exactly what had been done to her. When I stepped outside, the cold night air hit sharp, but it didn't matter. In the distance, I heard it. Engines, low and steady. The convoy arrived like thunder rolling in, one Humvee, then another, tires crunching over frozen ground. Soldiers stepped out in perfect rhythm, forming a silent perimeter without needing orders. I climbed into the lead vehicle. "Bus station," I said. We moved through the dark like something deliberate, unstoppable, and I knew before this night ended, my parents would feel the weight of what they had done. To understand why I reacted like that, you have to understand who my grandmother is to me. Margaret Ellis, Maggie to everyone else, Grandma to me. 78 years old, sharp-minded, sharp-tongued, stronger than most people half her age. She's the reason I became who I am. When I was growing up, my parents weren't around much. Dad was always chasing deals that never lasted. Mom was wrapped up in appearances, more concerned with social circles than family. Grandma filled the gaps. She made my lunches, fixed my clothes, sat through every performance, even the ones where I failed spectacularly. She told me once, "Strength isn't about being loud, it's about refusing to break." Those words stayed with me through the hardest training of my life. But to my parents, she was an inconvenience, a burden, something to manage, not someone to care for. They never said it outright, but it showed in everything they did. 3 months before that night, she had fallen in her kitchen, not severe, but enough to need help. I was overseas, so I asked my parents to check on her. They agreed. They didn't follow through. When I returned and went to see her, the house told the story. Bare pantry, piled laundry, neglect hiding in plain sight. She tried to brush it off, said she was fine. She wasn't. That was when I started showing up regularly, fixing things, taking care of what they ignored. They didn't like it. They saw it as interference. Then my mother said something that stuck with me. "You'll understand when you have to deal with someone like her." Deal with her? That night at the bus station erased whatever patience I had left. I didn't need explanations. I didn't want excuses. I knew exactly what this was, and I knew it couldn't wait. The convoy reached the station just before midnight. The place was empty except for one flickering light and her. She was still there, just like in the photo, only now she had her suitcase beside her. I stepped out before the vehicle fully stopped. "Grandma." She looked up, recognition softening her face, then confusion. I wrapped her in a coat, handed her warm tea. She looked past me at the line of vehicles, at the soldiers. "What is all this?" she asked. "Extraction," I said simply. She smiled faintly. Always dramatic. But her shoulders relaxed. For the first time that night, she wasn't alone. We got her settled in the vehicle. Torres leaned toward me. "What's next?" I looked toward my parents' street. We make a stop. The drive through the neighborhood felt unreal. Quiet streets filled with the sound of engines, lights flicking on, people watching. We parked outside my parents' house, blocking the street. I walked up and knocked hard. My father opened the door, irritated at first, then frozen when he saw everything behind me. "What is this?" I stepped aside so he could see her sitting in the vehicle. "You left her at a bus station," I said. Silence. "Get dressed," I told him. "You're coming outside." He hesitated. I stepped closer. "You're going to explain yourself, right now." He understood. Minutes later, he stood outside, under the streetlight, neighbors watching, silence pressing in. Grandma stepped out slowly. "Tell her," I said. He tried to soften it. I cut him off. "Tell the truth." The crowd murmured. Finally, he broke. "I'm sorry." Grandma nodded quietly. "Can we go now?" she asked me. I helped her back into the vehicle. Before leaving, I looked at my parents. This doesn't happen again. We drove off, leaving them standing there, exposed in a way they had never been before. By morning, the video was everywhere, and I wasn't finished. At 10 a.m., I took Grandma to town hall. No convoy this time, didn't need one. When I spoke, I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. "This is my grandmother," I said. 3 nights ago, she was left alone in the cold. The room went silent. My parents sat in the back. I didn't let them hide. This isn't about sympathy. It's about accountability. The mayor spoke. My father apologized again. I didn't accept it as an accident. "It was a choice," I said, and everyone heard it. Outside, Grandma looked at me softly. "You didn't have to do all this." "Yes," I said. "I did, because silence would have let them forget, but now they wouldn't." 2 days later, the story had spread everywhere. News, radio, social media.
People were talking. My parents were feeling it. Calls, questions, pressure. I could have stopped there. The apology was on record. The town had seen them humbled, and Grandma was safe. But I kept thinking about that photo, the one of her sitting alone at the bus station, the way her hands were folded in her lap, the way her coat looked too thin for the cold. That image had burned itself into my memory, and I wanted to make sure it burned into theirs too. That's why I called in one last favor from my unit.
On a quiet Saturday afternoon, my parents' street filled with a deep, rumbling growl of diesel engines. Not one Humvee this time, not 5, but 3 Humvees and 2 massive military transport trucks. No weapons, no intimidation, just presence. We parked along the curb in a perfect line. Uniformed Navy SEALs stepped out, not armed, but in their full dress blues. Each carried something in their hands. At the center of the formation, I walked forward with Grandma on my arm. She wore the same scarf from the town hall, and for the first time in weeks, her hair was done the way she used to, like it neat and dignified. My parents were already standing on their porch, confusion written all over their faces. Neighbors peeked through curtains. A few even stepped out onto their lawns. When we stopped at the foot of the driveway, I turned to the men and women behind me. Formation in perfect unison, the SEALs lined up, 3 to each side of us. Then, at my signal, they turned to face my parents. "This," I said, my voice carrying across the quiet street, "is the family my grandmother deserved the night you left her at that bus station. This is the respect you refused to show her." One by one, the SEALs stepped forward and placed their items on the driveway: a folded blanket, a thermos of hot tea, a pair of warm gloves, an umbrella, a flashlight, a handwritten note that read, "You are never alone." I could see my mother's throat working, her eyes darting to the neighbors, the cameras, the growing crowd. My father's hands were shoved deep in his pockets, but I noticed the twitch in his jaw. "Grandma doesn't need your money," I said, looking at them both. "She doesn't need your approval. What she needs, what she's always deserved, is your presence, your respect. And when you failed to give it, others stepped in." I stepped closer, my boots crunching on the driveway. "You can't erase what you did. You can't take back that night, but you can remember it. Every time you see these things," I gestured to the driveway, "you'll remember exactly who had to show up in your place." The SEALs turned sharply back toward the street, but before they left, I gave one final command: "Honor." As one, they dropped to a knee before Grandma. Not for me, not for the spectacle, but for her. The woman who had survived Depression-era childhood, raised a family, worked until her hands ached, and still had kindness to give. The street was silent except for the sound of someone's phone recording video. Then I took Grandma's hand, helped her into the lead Humvee, and we rolled away. I didn't look back, but I knew they were still standing there, my parents watching the convoy disappear with the eyes of the entire neighborhood on them. They would never admit it out loud, but I knew that image, that moment, they'd never forget it, and that was the point. The videos hit the internet before we even made it back to Grandma's place. Someone had filmed the whole thing: the convoy rolling down the street, the SEALs forming up, the gifts being placed on the driveway, the moment they knelt. By the time I helped Grandma inside, my phone was buzzing non-stop. By nightfall, the clip had over 1 million views. The comment section was flooded with strangers from all over the country: veterans, grandkids, even nurses who worked in elder care. Some were angry on Grandma's behalf. Some shared their own stories of neglect and family betrayal. And some simply said, "This is how you honor someone who raised you." The local news anchor called me for an interview. National outlets picked it up. It wasn't about embarrassing my parents anymore. It had become a conversation about dignity, duty, and what families owe to the people who built them. Grandma didn't care much for the attention. She'd laugh and say, "I'm too old to be famous." But I caught her sitting up straighter, smiling more often. The sparkle in her eyes returned. She started baking again, and on Sundays, she'd hum the old songs she used to sing while cooking when I was a kid. My parents didn't speak to me for weeks, but I know they saw the headlines. I know they heard the whispers in church and at the country club. They'd wanted to keep things quiet. I'd made sure the world knew instead. A month later, I got a letter. It wasn't from them, at least not directly. It was from my mother's sister. She wrote that they were rethinking a few things, that maybe they'd lost sight of what family is supposed to be. I didn't respond. Not yet. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can say is nothing at all. Instead, I focused on Grandma. We took drives along the coast. We sat in the back garden drinking tea in the cool evenings. I even took her onto base one day, introduced her to the unit. She laughed when one of the younger SEALs asked if she'd ever considered joining the Navy. And here's the thing, I didn't do all of this just to punish my parents. I did it because I wanted Grandma to see, to feel that she was worth fighting for, that no matter who failed her, she would always have someone ready to stand up, show up, and protect her. Looking back, I realized that day at the bus station could have gone so differently if I hadn't checked my messages, if I hadn't made those calls, if I'd let my parents' words, "Grandpa stays home," or "she's fine," there set the course. But I didn't, because when someone you love is left out in the cold, you don't just walk past, you turn around, you go back, you make it right, and you make sure the people responsible remember exactly why they'll never get the chance to do it again. To anyone hearing this, maybe you've got your own bus station moment buried somewhere in your memory. Maybe it wasn't about a grandparent, maybe it was a friend, a neighbor, someone who once stood by you when no one else did. If that person's still here, call them, visit them, show up. Not because the world is watching, but because that's what decent people do. And if someone in your life has forgotten how to honor the ones who came before them, well, remind them loudly if you have to. Because respect isn't something you ask for, it's something you give. And sometimes it's something you fight for. This is my story. That was my grandma, and this was the day the whole world remembered her name.